This past month has been a hotpot of competition, both in China and online. We've seen the results of 3 of the 4 Chinese regionals, with the last one in this cycle coming soon after this video is released. So I think now is the perfect time to summarize the last month in the Spiritforged meta, which legends see play, which ones place well in events, and if Midrange Draven was just a flash in the pan. I'm Simon from Games Deconstructed, and let's get started. And to start us off, here's the overall top 8 legend representation across all the events in our sample. Unsurprisingly, we see a good number of Dravens, but somewhat surprisingly, that number is lower than 20% of the total. He's followed by Irelia at 13.5% and Fiora at 10.2%. Past that, we have 4 more decks at roughly 6% of the top 8 field in Kai'Sa, Ezreal, Sivir, and Azir, in that order. The top 3 decks make up about 43% of the top 8 field, which is one of the more diverse formats we've seen thus far, Origins included. Compared to last month, the most relevant change is the drop in Draven's popularity by about 6.5 percentage points. But in terms of numbers, the bigger swings happen to Fiora and Kai'Sa. The first increasing in popularity from 3-ish to over 10%, and the other dropping off monumentally by about 10 percentage points. 10 percentage points may not sound monumental, but that means that for every Fiora early adopter that was here last month, there's now 3 or 4 players slinging riposts on the daily. For Kai'Sa, kind of the opposite. And for Fiora, my immediate association with the deck is EDG BTM Sun's Deep Run piloting the legend at the Fuzhou Regionals, the first tournament in this regional cycle where that player made the finals. And I thought of checking whether his victory was the originator of the deck's popularity or a symptom of the overall Chinese metagame already having discovered the champion quote-unquote organically. And the data leans towards the latter. In the tournaments leading up to Fuzhou, Fiora was already at 9.3% of the top 8 field, firmly in the 3rd position on the deck popularity scale. Fuzhou undeniably contributed to that popularity, she rises to 12.5% top 8 share in the period after, but I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that the deck's appearance in the finals was a game changer for Fiora's play right here. I think the game was changing well before that. Kai'Sa and Draven's drop-offs are an interesting case too. If we filter down to just tournaments with more than 32 players, which for China still gives us a good sample cause city challenges are massive, Kai'Sa remains at 10% popularity and Draven at a concerningly high 32%. Apart from these being tournaments with more rounds of Swiss, kind of by definition, this also places a slightly higher weight on tournaments where best of 3s are a format. City challenges, which usually have about 100 participants, at least more than 60, are kind of a mixed format in that they play best of 1s in Swiss and then best of 3 in the top cut, and regionals of course are strictly best of 3. And in these larger tournaments, Draven is actually doing better than last month by about 5 percentage points, and that is very much the type of performance that we've seen, for example, in the Chengdu regional, where 5 Dravens made top 8. There is of course a couple of reasons I could see for these differences. The first is an argument about the decks themselves. Both Draven and Kai'Sa are, among their other strengths, very reliable decks, with a good bit of card redundancy as well. This is at a premium in longer tournaments where you play more rounds of Swiss, and is of course at a premium in best of 3 because you play more games overall. On the other hand, there is of course the argument from player preference. Higher player counts and more competitive tournaments bring in more experienced players, and those more experienced players are likely to gravitate towards what they perceive to be the best deck, Draven, or towards decks that they had sufficient testing for, that would be Kai'Sa. At a lower competition level, however, folks may drift away from playing the same old Kai'Sa, or decks that seem try-hardy and fit for card game villains, which would be Draven. Plus, card availability is probably better in the second month of Spiritforged, allowing more people to switch off Kai'Sa, which they already had built after Origins season, but which seems less interesting now that they have played it for a couple of months. And for some players at the local level, Draven cards may be getting prohibitively expensive, but this is something that's less likely to apply to the pros, and as such, less likely to have an impact on those larger tournaments. If we look at top 4s and top 2s, there's the usual trend of the top 3 decks taking up bigger and bigger slices of the pie, though not by much. They still make up less than 50% of all finalists in our sample. Before we move on, let us commiserate on what seems to be the death of Master Yi, who was struggling for dear life in the first month of the new set, but hasn't really found a competitive foothold anywhere, and has now fallen below Rek'Sai in terms of top 8 performance. I expect his color pair to be fully taken over by Jax, now that we've seen a Jax list do well in the Dalian regional. Now, one area that's of personal interest to me is the lack of visibility of Miracle Draven. In case you're unfamiliar, the deck differs from a normal Draven in that it runs units that get cost discounts. Those would be Rassas and Battering Rams, and attempts to play them both quickly and often all at once, in one huge turn using Purple's excellent card advantage and discard tools. The deck's success in an early playtest tournament in Bologna and its recognizably different play pattern compared to the usual mid-range Draven would, in my opinion, merit at least rigorous testing, if not guaranteed success. So the question I wanna see answered is, why am I not seeing it as much as I thought I would be? Is it not played much overall? Is it just unpopular? Or does it escape my scrutiny because it places lower than other Draven builds? Or perhaps it's mostly played in smaller events but not the bigger ones that I follow more closely? So I checked how many and which Draven pilots run Rassas and Battering Rams, the 2 giveaways of playing a Miracle build of the legend, and the results are as follows. Imagine, if you will, a room of 100 Dravens. Imagine the conversations happening there, imagine the general ambience, and now imagine that only 19 of those Dravens would play Rassa plus Rams. An additional 7 play Rams, but not necessarily Rassas, since there's another list, one I would call Casino Draven floating around, which uses Nocturnes instead of Rassas. But it still attempts to turbo out, so Rams remain on its menu. It is played less, but not overwhelmingly so. So then I wanted to test whether Miracle lists appear more often in smaller tournaments. I calculated the average player size of tournaments in which we've seen each of these 3 variants, and Miracle is actually more likely to show up at larger tournaments, with about 98% statistical significance. It's not a huge difference, mind you. The average tournament size expected for a mid-range Draven is about 109 players, again, city challenges are massive, while for Miracle it's about 133. For Casino, it's a neat 100. Now, I expect this difference to imply that Miracle's more widespread at regionals, which have substantially higher player counts but are of course much less numerous than city challenges and whatever the lower tier is called. And this might result in an average, like you see here, that's just slightly bigger. To minimize the impact of tournament size, I calculated the expected positions of each deck weighted by the number of participants, and these are virtually the same for all 3 variants. Midrange will on average finish about 27th in a 100-person tournament, and the other 2 just 1 place behind at 28th. Bear in mind that in a fully random environment, the expected finish at a 100-person tournament would be 50th or 51st, so that strongly indicates that all 3 Draven variants are overperforming compared to the rest of their field, and those fields might very well be different. As mentioned, Casino probably plays against a less competitive field. But this just goes to show that what appears on streams and what gains traction online is just a small part of the metagame. A non-trivial variant of a deck can appear to be missing from it, despite it putting in comparable results to the kind of main version of the game. Especially for massive tournaments like regionals, for every Draven that you see dominating the top 8 on stream, there's maybe 10 others doing very well, finishing 20th or 30th, but not gathering as much attention. Having that out of the way, let's move on to conclusions, but before we do that, if you're enjoying the video thus far, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and I will be immensely grateful for it. Thank you very much. Now, the results from these regional tournaments confirm in my eyes that we are still in the discovery stages of the meta. Fiora's rise to popularity, the discovery of Rat Ezreal, the upcoming experiments with Jax after one finished in the top 8 for the Dalian regional, those are all relatively recent happenings, and I'm sure there is more to come. And it's quite fortunate that we haven't yet had a Draven versus Draven final in any of the 3 regionals, as that kind of softened the blow of Draven winning 2 of them. Now, all the other non-Draven decks are built with the expectation of matching well into Draven, so the shadow of the Grand Executioner is still felt across the metagame, even if he himself is not present in every single game you play. And before Spiritforged is over, we might very well see an adjustment towards trying to counter the Draven counters rather than Draven himself, but for the time being, I'm just glad that there exists a number of those decks that have a decent matchup into Draven. They come in a multitude of flavors and have interesting matchups into one another, or each other. I can never tell which one is which. Now, for Bologna and Vegas, I would expect a bit more than 18% of the Dravens present at those regionals to play the Miracle variant of the deck, maybe closer to 25 or 30% of the total Dravens. And I don't know if Casino is going to be a serious consideration anywhere, but I'll still be reading through the list once or twice to know what it does very generally. And in the immediate next Chinese regional this weekend, I would say Rat Ezreal is a deck to watch out for. It still was relatively new when it came to Dalian, but by now people should have plenty of training with it, so I expect for it to show up in force at the next regional. And for the upcoming release in the West, I would add to that list Jax and Sivir. Both have shown promise in the Dalian regional, and I know there's a lot of excellent players in the West already practicing with Sivir, so I would say that both of these legends are slightly underrated based on just the data. Let me know in the comments if you like this video format, if you'd like for me to take a look at different metagame factors, and you can expect the next installment of this series in about a month. Thanks a lot for watching, and a special thank you to the Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/gamesdeconstructed. The Patreon is the best way to directly support the channel if you feel like it, and you can join such luminaries as Maciej Majka, Jakub Burdun, and Dillinger. Thank you very much. I've been Simon from Games Deconstructed, and I hope to see you in the next one.